The city sprawled like a river of glass and steel, where towering skyscrapers reflected the blazing sun, and luxury venues gleamed with polished marble and shining gold. Yet, in the shadow of this modern wealth stood the sacred remnants of the past, ancestral grounds dotted with carved stones, worn paths, and ceremonial statues that whispered stories of generations long gone. The citizens moved between these worlds, their hearts pulled by the pulse of ambition, yet anchored by respect for their roots. In the streets, children played near ancient trees whose twisted branches had seen centuries of festivals, victories, and sorrows, while elders watched with solemn pride, murmuring proverbs that warned of pride and celebrated wisdom. High above, in a glass-walled penthouse overlooking the city, the male protagonist paced. His tailored suit clung to him like armor, a symbol of power crafted from inheritance and sharpened by a lifetime of calculated ambition. Eyes narrowed, he stared at the skyline with a mixture of pride and bitterness, remembering betrayals that had marked his youth and the mistakes that had left scars on his soul. The boardrooms he had conquered were temples of his making, yet they could not fill the emptiness that simmered beneath his polished exterior. She must feel her place, he muttered to himself, his jaw tight. She must see that power has its price, that pride is rewarded only to those who seize it. Meanwhile, far from the opulent heights of the penthouse, she moved quietly through her modest apartment, unaware of the power she now held. The ex-wife, radiant in her humility, arranged papers on her simple desk, oblivious that her signature today made her the new owner of the very company that had once defined both their lives. Her fingers lingered on the embossed letterhead as memories flickered across her mind, late nights spent in whispered conversation, laughter that had once warmed their small apartment, and the bitter silence that had followed their separation. She was kind, intelligent, grounded in the wisdom of her upbringing, and guided by lessons learned at the feet of elders. That strength lay in endurance, and justice was more powerful than revenge. The gala preparations filled the city with anticipation, a spectacle that blended the glittering excess of modern life with the solemn dignity of tradition. Invitations, embossed in gold leaf, traveled swiftly through the hands of society elites. Caterers rehearsed the dance of service, arranging silver and crystal to reflect light like tiny stars. Musicians tuned drums and strings, the rhythms echoing both contemporary jazz and ancestral beats, a bridge between centuries. Staff and guests alike whispered the coming event, unaware of the storm brewing beneath its polished surface. The gala was more than a party. It was a stage upon which pride, revenge, and hidden truths would collide. On the streets below, the people of the city moved with a dual consciousness. They marveled at towering glass structures and sparkling venues, yet their eyes often strayed to carved statues, to the shadows of sacred spaces where ancestors had walked. Mothers taught their children to respect both realms. Ambition can build towers, but wisdom honors the land that raised you. Vendors sold street food alongside haute couture boutiques, a testament to the delicate balance between modernity and tradition. In these streets, the tension between old and new, wealth and heritage, pride and humility, quietly pulsed, setting the stage for the drama to come. In a private corner of the gala venue, preparations unfolded with meticulous precision. The protagonist oversaw every detail, from seating arrangements to ceremonial rituals, with minds sharpened by calculation and a heart steeled by past disappointments. He imagined the moment of public humiliation, the subtle positioning of tables, the careful curation of guest interactions, the whispers that would follow. Let her stumble. Let the world see, he thought, a shadow of triumph flickering across his face. Yet the universe, as the elders often said, has ways of balancing pride and humility. The ex-wife, meanwhile, remained unaware of the intricacies being plotted against her. She moved with quiet dignity through the corridors of the mansion, her thoughts on the work she had inherited, on the people she wished to help, and on the larger vision of justice and fairness that guided her every action. Her presence, calm yet radiant, drew the attention of the staff, not for fear, but for the respect that came naturally to those who act from wisdom rather than ego. Even the youngest servant sensed that she carried authority invisible to the untrained eye, a power that did not shout but commanded nonetheless. The city itself seemed to hold its breath, a living witness to the convergence of pride and humility, of ambition and wisdom. Skyscrapers glinted under the setting sun, and the shadows of ancestral monuments stretched across streets where the modern and traditional intertwined. Above, the gala lights flickered to life, 1,000 tiny stars illuminating the night, reflecting in polished shoes, crystal glasses, and the anxious eyes of guests who sensed that tonight destiny would play its hand. Within the mansion, subtle signs hinted that this night would not unfold as the protagonist planned. The ex-wife, guided by her humility and intelligence, made decisions that would influence every detail of the event. Without her knowledge, she shaped the evening to her advantage. The protagonist's schemes, built on assumptions and pride, risked unraveling under the weight of her hidden authority. The tension between past and present, ambition and morality, pride and wisdom, grew heavier with each passing moment, foreshadowing a confrontation that would shake the very foundations of both their lives. The air inside the gala was electric with anticipation. Guests arrived in shimmering gowns and tailored suits, laughter mingling with the drumbeats echoing from ancestral corners. The protagonist's eyes scanned the crowd, calculating, plotting, measuring impact. Across the room, the ex-wife's gentle demeanor and quiet confidence began to draw attention. Her smile neither boastful nor arrogant, her movements guided by respect and instinct. The stage was set, the players in position, and the dance between pride and humility began, unseen by many but felt by all who understood the subtle currents of power, tradition, and morality. As the first ceremonial drum sounded, the protagonist's mind raced with possibilities, unaware that the true measure of power was not in wealth or public perception, but in the calm authority and hidden knowledge carried by the ex-wife. She, like the river that cuts through both rock and sand, would find a path to influence that no amount of scheming could block. And in that moment, the city, ancient and modern, rich and humble, watched silently, as if the ancestors themselves had returned to witness the unfolding of fate and justice. The city stretched beneath the morning sun, a landscape of glass towers and polished marble, yet the sacred whispers of the past lingered in the corners of streets where ancestral stones had stood for centuries. Among these modern marvels, luxury venues rose like crowns upon the heads of the city's wealthy, shimmering with gold and crystal, reflecting the ambitions of those who walked their hallowed halls. The air itself carried attention, a pulse of expectation, as if the spirits of forebears watched the lives of mortals unfold, ready to reward wisdom and punish arrogance. High above the bustling streets, in a penthouse that overlooked both the glittering skyscrapers and the hallowed ground below, the male protagonist sat in a chair of polished ebony, his posture straight, his gaze sharp. A suit of midnight blue hugged his broad shoulders, and a gold watch glinted in the sunlight, a silent proclamation of both power and taste. He was a man shaped by both inheritance and the relentless pursuit of success, a figure respected and envied in boardrooms and social circles alike. His reputation was impeccable, a combination of strategic brilliance and personal charisma that few dared to question. Yet behind a mask of calm authority, hidden anger simmered, a legacy of past betrayals that refused to fade. Memories of youthful ambition thwarted by jealousy, of trust given and broken, flickered in his mind like shadows at dusk. He leaned back, fingers steepled, eyes narrowing at the horizon. "Power is fleeting, but pride endures," he muttered. The words moored himself into the empty room. Tonight, she will understand. Tonight, she will see. The protagonist's presence commanded attention wherever he moved. In boardrooms, his word was law. In social gatherings, a glance from him could silence conversation. Colleagues and acquaintances often whisper his sharp mind and unyielding will, yet few knew the fire that burned quietly beneath his composure. The resentment, the desire for control, the subtle need to reclaim a dignity he felt had been challenged. Even his closest friends tread carefully, aware that pride and vengeance could intertwine in ways both unpredictable and devastating. Meanwhile, across the city in a quieter district, she went about her mourning with calm grace. The ex-wife, unassuming yet radiant, was unaware that the document she had signed that very morning had made her the owner of the company that had once been the center of both their lives. Her small apartment smelled of freshly brewed tea and polished wood, the scent of home and simplicity. Her hands lingered over the documents, her mind tracing the past with gentle curiosity, recalling the time she had shared with the man now plotting behind high glass walls. She remembered laughter, whispered promises, and then the sharp silence that had come when ambition and pride outweighed love and understanding. Her intelligence and humility set her apart. She moved through the city streets with a quiet authority, an unspoken respect emanating from her actions. People noticed her kindness, her careful words, the way she acknowledged the old and the young with equal warmth. Unlike the protagonist, her power was not wielded to dominate or control. It was rooted in wisdom, patience, and the understanding that every action carried consequence. Even the spirits of the city, according to the elders' tales, would have smiled upon her measured steps. The gala, the centerpiece of the city's social calendar, loomed on the horizon like a glittering promise of both glory and humiliation. Invitations had been dispatched in embossed envelopes, delivered to the hands of society's elite. The venue, a modern palace of glass and light, was adorned with ancestral symbols subtly integrated into its architecture. Carved wooden panels, ceremonial masks displayed alongside modern chandeliers, and a stage where history and progress danced together in silent harmony. Preparations moved like a well-rehearsed ritual. Caterers arranged gleaming silver. Musicians tuned drums and strings that spoke both to contemporary ears and to the traditions of their forebears. In the penthouse, the protagonist reviewed every detail of the gala, his mind weaving together strategies of influence, social leverage, and the art of subtle humiliation. Every seating arrangement, every guest placement, every ceremonial toast was under his careful watch. "She will be reminded," he murmured, eyes glinting with determination, "that past mistakes carry weight, that power is not given lightly, and that pride must bow to experience." Yet even as he plotted, hints of the coming reversal flickered like sparks he could not see. The ex-wife, guided by intuition and her natural intelligence, had already begun to influence the event without realizing it. Decisions she made, choices of decor, subtle adjustments in the program, personal touches for staff and guests, would ripple across the evening in ways that the protagonist could not predict. The wisdom instilled in her by elders, the lessons of patience, endurance, and understanding were forces he had never learned to measure. As the day waned and the city lights began to flicker, the tension grew palpable. Skyscrapers reflected the last rays of the sun, casting long shadows over ancestral monuments that seemed to watch silently. Street vendors packed their goods. Children ran past statues that had seen generations, and elders whispered proverbs that spoke of pride, patience, and fate. Inside the gala venue, staff adjusted silverware, musicians began a slow cadence, and the first guests arrived, dressed in glittering fabrics and tailored suits. The protagonist's eyes scanned the room, his anticipation mounting. Across the crowd, the ex-wife entered, calm, composed, and radiant in her simplicity, drawing attention not through ostentation, but through presence and grace. The room itself seemed to lean forward, the city's heartbeat quickening in response to the unseen tension. Every gaze, every whispered conversation, every subtle movement carried weight. The protagonist's anger, rooted in pride and past grievance, met the ex-wife's quiet authority and hidden power. The air shimmered with the promise of revelation, of confrontation, and of a reckoning that neither wealth nor status could fully control. And so, beneath the glimmering chandeliers and ancestral symbols, the stage was set. Pride and wisdom, ambition and humility, past and present, all converged in a single night. The city watched silently, as if ancestors themselves had returned to witness the unfolding of human hearts and the inevitable balance of justice. The first chords of ceremonial music sounded, and with them, the tension became almost tangible. The protagonist's schemes, built on knowledge of the past and assumption of ignorance, began to meet the reality of wisdom he had underestimated. The night promised confrontation, revelation, and the stirring of change that would ripple far beyond the walls of the gala. The city pulsed with life beneath the golden African sun, a tapestry woven from glass towers, sleek roads, and the shadows of sacred ancestral monuments. Skyscrapers reflected ambition and wealth, their mirrored surfaces glinting like the eyes of the restless spirits that lingered in the streets. Yet the land itself whispered stories older than any tower, reminders that no matter how high humans reached, the earth beneath them held memories of those who had come before. Between the ultramodern and the ancestral, citizens navigated a delicate balance, honoring tradition while pursuing the glittering promises of prosperity. In a penthouse that seemed to scrape the sky, the male protagonist moved with the assuredness of a man who had conquered both inheritance and circumstance. His dark suit was tailored to perfection, his shoes polished until they reflected the ceiling lights like tiny mirrors. The air around him seemed to hum authority. His name was spoken in whispers in boardrooms and halls of power, where every handshake carried weight and every glance commanded attention. Yet behind his composed exterior, a fire smoldered, a mixture of pride, old pain, and the subtle bitterness of a heart wronged. He paused by the window, eyes narrowing on the cityscape below. "Tonight," he murmured, almost to himself, "she will know what it means to step into the lion's den unarmed." The words were measured, sharp, loaded with the tension of calculated intent. The memory of their shared past, laughter, stolen glances, and promises that had dissolved into silence, was a shadow trailing him still. The pride that once built his empire now shaped his desire for subtle retribution, a way to assert dominance over a woman who had, in earlier days, understood his heart more deeply than anyone else. Across the city, the ex-wife moved through the streets with quiet purpose, unaware of the shift in her fate. In her small apartment, morning light spilled over the polished wood of her table, the aroma of herbal tea filling the air. The document she had signed earlier lay folded beside her, unassuming papers that, in truth, had made her the new owner of the very company the protagonist had built and controlled. Her life had been simple, guided by the wisdom of elders, the proverbs of her village, and the principle that true power was not taken but earned through patience, respect, and moral clarity. She dressed with grace, yet without extravagance. A dress of deep ochre hugged her frame modestly, its color reminiscent of earth and harvest. Her hair, braided simply, reflected the care of her hands and the pride of her heritage. Every movement carried humility and strength, the kind of presence that drew attention not through spectacle but through dignity. As she prepared to attend the gala, she felt only anticipation for a night of celebration, unaware of the careful schemes a man she had once loved had set in motion. The gala was a convergence of worlds, modern opulence intertwined with traditional ceremony. The venue, a palace of glass and polished marble, shimmered with light, adorned with masks and carved panels that spoke to generations past. Musicians tuned drums and strings, preparing rhythms that echoed both contemporary sophistication and the heartbeats of ancestors. Staff adjusted silver platters, polished goblets, and carefully arranged floor displays, their movements precise, almost ritualistic, like a dance passed down to the whispers of elders. As guests arrived, the male protagonist watched from a vantage point atop the grand staircase, his gaze seeking her among the crowd. The city's elite, adorned in vibrant silks and tailored suits, moved with practiced elegance, yet his focus was unwavering. Every detail had been orchestrated, the seating, the lighting, the program, to ensure that the evening would reflect both his status and the subtle humiliation he intended for her. Yet as she entered the hall, her calm and grounded presence rippled through the air like a wind carrying ancient wisdom, unseen but profoundly felt. Her eyes, bright and kind, scanned the room with awareness and respect, greeting servers and elders alike with a gentle nod, her gestures carrying warmth and integrity. Memories of their past flickered across her expression, a silent acknowledgement of shared history, the joy, the mistakes, and the unspoken truths that had once bound them. She walked with the quiet certainty of someone who understood the weight of actions and the importance of balance, her moral strength contrasting sharply with protagonist's pride-fueled calculations. Nearby, he tightened his jaw, sensing that her presence, unassuming yet commanding in its quiet dignity, might disrupt the carefully constructed narrative of humiliation he had envisioned. She had no idea she now held the authority of ownership, yet her mere authenticity radiated a form of power he had never measured. The crowd moved around them like a river of silk and light, oblivious to the silent tension building at the center. Every smile she offered, every courteous word spoken to a guest, carried weight in ways he could neither anticipate nor control. "Tonight," he whispered again, eyes narrowing, "she will bow." Unaware, she approached the table where the formalities of the gala would begin, greeting officials and guests with genuine warmth. Her kindness was deliberate yet effortless, rooted in principles passed down through her family and community. As she spoke with a young assistant about the seating arrangements, a subtle influence began to take shape. Tables shifted to better honor elder guests. Ceremonial symbols were positioned with cultural respect, and a careful harmony filled the space that had been intended for tension. The male protagonist watched, incredulous, as the subtle elegance of her leadership unfolded. Each act of propriety, each word spoken with tact, revealed a wisdom beyond mere knowledge of protocol. It was moral strength, patience, and insight distilled into action. His carefully laid plans to humiliate her began to falter, replaced by a growing unease. The pride that had driven him now met the quiet authority of a woman he had once underestimated. Outside, the city continued its rhythm, a dance of neon lights and ancestral echoes. The gala, with all its grandeur, was but one night in a long continuum of life and legacy. Yet within that hall, tension coiled like a serpent, waiting for the inevitable clash between pride and integrity, ambition and humility. The male protagonist's eyes followed her every movement, aware that the unfolding evening would reveal truths far beyond social status. Truths that touched the essence of character, honor, and justice. The first ceremonial drum beats began, the sound resonating deep in the floorboards, vibrating through the walls, and into the hearts of those present. The ex-wife paused, recognizing the cadence as both festive and sacred, a rhythm meant to honor tradition while celebrating progress. She bowed her head slightly, a gesture of respect to the elders whose presence lingered in the symbolism around her. The protagonist, standing on the balcony above, clenched his fists. The night had begun, but already he felt the subtle shift. The humility, moral strength, and quiet wisdom of the woman before him would challenge his pride in ways he had not foreseen. And so the stage was set, a modern African city, a gala blending luxury and heritage, a man driven by pride and past grievance, and a woman whose humility concealed her newly acquired power. The tension between them hummed through the air, as if the ancestors themselves held their breath, watching the unfolding drama that would test hearts, challenge egos, and redefine the meaning of strength. The night air of the city shimmered with lights that mirrored the stars. Yet beneath the modern sheen, the heartbeat of tradition pulsed steadily. Skyscrapers reached like silver-tipped spears toward the heavens, their glass facades reflecting the glow of lanterns and neon alike. Between these towers, ancestral landmarks stood in quiet dignity, carved from stone and wood, their presence a reminder that even amidst wealth and ambition, the spirits of the forebears watched over the city. The contrast between the new and the old created a landscape alive with both beauty and tension, as if every citizen walked a tightrope between progress and reverence. Inside the grand hall prepared for the annual gala, staff moved like a chorus of disciplined dancers. White-gloved hands adjusted crystal goblets, polished silver platters, and perfectly folded napkins. The air was heavy with the scent of roses and incense, mingling with a faint aroma of roasted nuts and delicate spices. Every arrangement, from the seating of dignitaries to the placement of ceremonial masks, had been calculated with the precision of generations who understood that appearances carried as much weight as deeds. Musicians tuned drums, kora, and stringed instruments, their soft notes echoing against marble walls and ornate columns. The rhythm was deliberate, a marriage of modern orchestration and the primal cadence of ancestral drums, a beat that called forth respect, reflection, and readiness. Attendants whispered instructions under their breath, eyes darting toward mirrors and windows to ensure nothing disrupted the balance of grandeur. Every guest would arrive in attire that spoke to lineage, wealth, and the subtle language of social rank, for this night was not merely a celebration. It was a testament to power, expectation, and inherited authority. The male protagonist stood atop the balcony overlooking the hall, the polished wood of the staircase beneath him reflecting his confident stance. In a tailored black suit with a subtle sheen, he held a crystal glass, watching as the staff conducted their meticulous preparations. Every movement, every glance, was a piece of a larger puzzle he had arranged. His jaw tightened as he recalled the months of planning, not for profit, not for acclaim, but for the quiet humiliation he intended for her, the woman he had once loved. Yet beneath his composure, a flicker of uncertainty stirred. Memories of shared laughter, whispered promises, and the subtle bond they had once nurtured now tugged at the edges of his pride. "She believes she is only a guest," he muttered softly, voice lost in the hum of activity. "She does not know the power she now wields." Tonight, she will feel her place or lack of it. His eyes swept the room, noting every detail. The polished floors, the chandeliers sparkling like captured constellations, and the guests arriving in waves of silks, lace, and tailored elegance. Every element had been designed to display wealth, hierarchy, and status. But all of it, he hoped, would cast a shadow over her humility. Far from the balcony, the ex-wife prepared herself with calm care in a quiet suite behind the hall. Her dress, a deep sapphire blue, flowed around her with grace, modest yet elegant, reflecting the dignity of her character. Her hair, braided simply, framed a face illuminated by intelligence and warmth. She adjusted a small piece of jewelry, a gift from her village elders, and inhaled the scent of the incense lingering in the room. "The night belongs to celebration, not fear," she whispered, a proverb from her childhood echoing in her mind. A calm heart sees the path clearly, even in the midst of storms. As she descended the staircase, each step was deliberate, carrying the quiet assurance of someone who understood respect, patience, and integrity. Staff bowed subtly in acknowledgement, recognizing in her the kind of presence that commanded attention without demanding it. Guests paused, offering polite nods and greetings, and she returned each with genuine warmth. No one suspected that she was the unseen force behind the company that financed this very gala, nor that her understated influence had already shaped many of the evening's arrangements. The hall itself was a spectacle of convergence. Modern luxury fused seamlessly with ceremonial tradition. Tables adorned with gleaming silver, crystal, and hand-woven fabrics formed a mosaic of prestige, while ceremonial masks and ancestral carvings punctuated the room with echoes of history. Drummers began a slow rhythm, a heartbeat that intertwined with the soft chatter of arriving dignitaries, and the flickering of candlelight reflected on faces that carried both expectation and curiosity. The sound of strings and wind instruments merged at the bass of drums, creating a symphony that bridged eras, reminding all that while wealth could dazzle, tradition anchored the soul. Family members and society elites moved through the space with deliberate precision. Every handshake, every nod, carried significance. Elders inspected the ceremonial placements with discerning eyes, while young professionals in sharp suits and dresses evaluated one another with subtle calculations of status. The ex-wife's calm, grounded demeanor stood in contrast to the subtle competitiveness radiating from the crowd. Even the male protagonist, from his elevated vantage point, noticed how her simple gestures, her nods to elders, her polite inquiries of staff, radiated influence in a manner no display of wealth could match. "Remember your place, yet honor the house," an elderly attendant muttered, adjusting a ceremonial cloth. "Tonight, the spirits watch." The words, spoken softly, reflected the underlying tension. This gala was not merely a display. It was a test of character, authority, and social acumen. It was a night when pride could shine or crumble, when subtle gestures could be read as both respect and defiance, and when hidden knowledge could shift the balance of power. The ex-wife approached the main hall with quiet confidence, unaware of the full scope of her influence. Her eyes scanned the assembly, noting familiar faces and unspoken alliances. Though she had been unaware of her new position as company owner, her natural intelligence allowed her to intuit the delicate hierarchies at play. She offered a small, courteous smile to the male protagonist, whose sharp gaze followed her, calculating and uncertain. The tension between them was a taut thread, unseen yet palpable, carrying the weight of pride, revenge, and hidden histories. As the ceremonial drummer struck a rhythm that resonated deep within the hall, the first toast was raised. The ex-wife, humble yet dignified, acknowledged it with a gentle inclination of her head. The male protagonist's hand tightened around his glass. Plans of humiliation now met the reality of her composure, kindness, and inherent authority. Every movement she made seemed to gather attention not through ostentation, but through respect and quiet influence. The social balance of the evening, carefully orchestrated by the protagonist, began to shift in subtle, unanticipated ways. Outside, the city lights flickered like the watchful eyes of ancestors. Within, the gala unfolded as a stage where past grievances, unrecognized power, and the silent strength of moral character would clash. Guests laughed, musicians played, and candles burned, yet the air between the ex-wife and the protagonist was thick with tension, foreshadowing events that could unearth pride, confront hidden truths, and challenge the very essence of influence. The rhythms of drums and music, mingled with whispers and glances, seemed to murmur a warning. Tonight, wealth and status would meet integrity and humility, and the outcome would be a story carried in whispers for generations to come. The male protagonist's gaze lingered on her, calculating, wary, and silently wondering if the evening would bend his will, or if, against all expectation, the quiet wisdom and moral strength of the ex-wife will reveal a power he had failed to anticipate. The gala had begun, and with it, the intricate dance of ambition, pride, and revelation that would determine who truly held authority, not through money or status, but through character and foresight. The city gleamed under the amber glow of the evening sun, skyscrapers shimmering like polished tusks, standing proudly beside ancient stones and monuments that whispered stories of old. In this city, modern ambition and ancestral reverence coexisted uneasily, as though every footstep in glass towers echoed in the hearts of those who had once walked barefoot on sacred lands. The air was thick with expectation and the scent of blooming jacaranda trees, a reminder that wealth could rise high, but roots ran deeper than concrete. Inside a grand white mansion, the annual gala prepared itself like a living organism. Crystal chandeliers cast prisms across polished floors, and ceremonial masks from distant villages hung with deliberate precision alongside sleek modern decor. The hall hummed with activity as staff adjusted floral arrangements, polished silver, and meticulously folded linens. Every movement carried weight, for the eyes of elders, dignitaries, and ambitious guests would read not just actions, but intentions, respect, and social rank. On a balcony overlooking the hall, the male protagonist, a man whose presence commanded rooms before words could reach ears, observed quietly. His tailored suit hinted at wealth, yet his eyes carried shadows deeper than any material possession could reveal. The pride he bore, the anger quietly nurtured from old betrayals, and the meticulous plans he had set in motion were all present in the way his gaze swept the room. "She believes herself beneath notice," he murmured, voice low enough to blend with the distant drums. "Yet tonight, she will feel the weight of expectation, the scrutiny of all she does not know. She will stumble under my design." His thoughts traveled back to the time she had laughed at a joke only he could understand, the quiet way she had challenged him in discussions without appearing to do so. The memory sparked both longing and irritation, a reminder of pride bruised, of control lost. He had invited her to this gala not as an honored guest, but as a mark of spectacle, a moment in which her ignorance would meet the weight of society's judgment. Meanwhile, the ex-wife adjusted the sleeves of her dress, a deep sapphire fabric that moved with elegance yet did not seek attention. Her movements were deliberate, carrying the calm confidence of one raised on proverbs and respect for elders. She had learned in the village that dignity was held in the way one carried themselves, in the balance between humility and integrity. "The tree that bends with the wind does not break," she whispered to herself, recalling the words of her grandmother. Unaware of her position as the true owner of the company hosting the gala, she approached the grand hall. Staff bowed discreetly, and guests nodded with polite curiosity. Her intelligence and warmth radiated subtly, drawing attention without grandeur. Each step she took was measured, and each glance polite, yet behind her serene exterior, the hall's pulse quickened. The male protagonist's plan relied upon her humiliation, but her quiet presence already unsettled him in ways he had not anticipated. The gala itself was alive with the tension between tradition and opulence. Drums rolled alongside violins, stringed instruments mingled with ceremonial flutes, and the voices of invited elders echoed chants that honored both heritage and achievement. Tables gleamed with polished silver, crystal, and intricately woven fabrics. The staff moved in orchestrated harmony, yet every action, every glance, reflected the expectations and judgments of society steeped in hierarchy and family prestige. "Ensure the elders are properly seated," whispered an attendant, voice carrying the weight of reverence. "Tonight, all must see their respect observed." The words hinted at the careful balancing act at play. Modern wealth displayed boldly, yet anchored by ancestral wisdom. Guests prepared themselves meticulously, adjusting collars, dresses, and headdresses, for every gesture could be interpreted. Every action weighed against the cultural scales of respect, dignity, and social standing. From his vantage point, the male protagonist watched the ex-wife, noting the subtle grace with which she interacted with both staff and guests. Each bow, each polite inquiry, seemed effortless, yet it unsettled him. His carefully laid plans of humiliation, intended to display her ignorance of her newfound power, were meeting an unexpected obstacle: her inherent strength, intelligence, and a quiet force of moral character. "She does not know what she commands," he muttered, his glass of wine steady in his hand, though tension creased his brow. "Yet it may not matter. Tonight I will show the world her place, or the lack of it." His tone carried both pride and the shadow of vengeance, the duality of ambition and wounded heart evident in every word. The ex-wife, moving to the hall, greeted dignitaries with warm smiles, nodding to elders and sharing soft laughter with colleagues she remembered from the company. There was no arrogance in her, no attempt to dominate. Yet as she spoke, others leaned in to listen, drawn not by wealth or title, but by presence, integrity, and intelligence. It was a subtle power, one not immediately recognized, but one that shifted the room in invisible ways. As the ceremonial drums signaled the beginning of the opening procession, the air seemed to hum with anticipation. Staff and guests alike readied themselves, adjusting attire and positions. The male protagonist's heartbeat quickened. The moment of confrontation, carefully orchestrated in his mind, approached with precision, but he could feel the unexpected influence of her humility and wisdom subtly altering the flow of the evening. He recalled the words of his father, stern and unyielding: "Power is not what you display, but what is recognized in the eyes of those who see your deeds." Tonight, he had intended for her ignorance to become spectacle, a moral lesson carved in embarrassment and social humiliation. Yet already, the moral scale seemed shifting. Her past kindness, her intelligence, and her unpretentious confidence threatened to undermine the very spectacle he had orchestrated. Music swelled. Ceremonial gestures marked their traditional sequences, and guests murmured among themselves. The ex-wife paused near a central display of ancestral masks, her gaze gentle and respectful, acknowledging the spirits of those who had come before. Her demeanor was both grounding and commanding, a paradox the male protagonist had not anticipated. A part of him, buried under pride and bitterness, felt the stirrings of doubt. Could one so seemingly humble hold the true power he had sought to mock? "Let this night show all who we are," he whispered, lifting his glass in a silent toast, though the ex-wife could not hear him. Pride, revenge, societal expectations, and hidden knowledge intertwined in the air, creating a tension that was palpable yet invisible, a storm held in check by decorum and tradition. The gala continued, each moment layered with ceremony, observation, and subtle contest of influence. Every gesture, glance, and word carried weight. The ex-wife moved gracefully, oblivious to the role she now played behind the scenes. The male protagonist watched, calculating, anticipating the impact of every planned slight. Yet beneath his confidence, a thread of unease took root. In the halls of wealth and tradition, among drummers, stringed instruments, and the quiet approval of elders, power was never what it seemed. The night had begun, but the true contest between pride and humility, vengeance and wisdom, display and substance, was only starting. And as the drums echoed through the hall, it was clear that this evening would not merely tell a story of wealth and spectacle, but a tale of moral reckoning, of hidden truths, and of the enduring force of character over pretense. The city stretched like a tapestry woven from gold and memory, modern skyscrapers glittering beside sacred stones and weathered monuments that carried centuries of ancestral whispers. The sun dipped low, painting glass facades with hues of amber, reflecting on streets alive with movement, ambition, and a quiet reverence for the roots beneath their feet. Here, wealth and tradition intertwined, an invisible line connecting power with responsibility, ambition with heritage. Every footstep in the marble lobbies and the cobbled squares carried echoes of the past. Within this city stood a mansion that rose like a palace of dreams, yet radiated tension as palpably as its crystal chandeliers reflected light. This was the home of the male protagonist, a man of undeniable influence, whose fortune had been built with both sharp instinct and inherited advantage. He moved through rooms with the poise of command, each gesture precise, measured, calculated. His suits were immaculate, yet the lines on his forehead spoke of more than years. They carried pride, anger, and the quiet memory of betrayal. "She does not know," he murmured. eyes narrowing toward the distant balcony where preparations for the gala were underway. She walks among us unaware of her strength, and tonight all will see how little she truly controls. The words were sharp, yet beneath them lingered a subtle unease. He remembered her laughter from years before, the intelligence that had once both challenged and charmed him. That memory pricked at a part of him he wished remained dormant. Still, pride and vengeance held sway. The gala would serve as a stage, the moment to display not only wealth but the superiority of knowledge he believed she lacked. Meanwhile, the ex-wife moved to the mansion's lower halls, unaware of the power her title now conferred. Her dress, a soft hue of sapphire, shimmered without flamboyance. She greeted the staff with warm smiles, a nod of acknowledgement to each elder who had served the family for decades. Every step was measured with care, the grace of one who understood that dignity was held not in dominance, but in the quiet strength of wisdom. "A river does not fight the rocks," she whispered to herself, remembering her grandmother's words. "Yet it shapes the land." She paused by a table displaying ceremonial artifacts, noting the intricate carvings of ancestors who had walked this land long before marble floors and glass towers existed. Her humility was apparent, yet her intellect shone subtly. She asked questions about the artifacts, inquiring about their meaning and history, drawing the attention of a few elders who nodded approvingly at her respect and curiosity. From above, the male protagonist observed, tension coiling like a serpent in his chest. The moment he had anticipated as one of humiliation seemed already complicated by the presence of her quiet authority, the innate morality and intelligence that flowed through her every gesture. His plan had been simple: invite her under the guise of politeness, orchestrate small embarrassments, and let societal expectations magnify them. But now, with her presence in the hall, moving through both elite guests and staff with grace, he sensed that his control might not be absolute. The gala itself was a spectacle of cultural convergence. Modern string quartets mingled with traditional drummers, while dancers in ceremonial attire moved in carefully choreographed patterns around glass and marble stages. Tables glittered with silverware, crystal, and woven fabrics dyed in patterns that told the stories of past kings and village elders. The scent of spiced meats and fresh flowers mingled with the warm evening air. Every guest had polished smiles, yet their eyes scanned each other, evaluating status, knowledge, and allegiance. "She walks with the calm of water," whispered one elder to another, watching the ex-wife approach. "Yet there is strength beneath her quietness." The male protagonist's jaw tightened. Pride and vengeance war with the unanticipated truth before him. Humility could command attention in ways ostentation could not. He watched as she exchanged words with the young executives, sharing advice and guidance without seeking acknowledgement. Each nod of respect she received, though subtle, stirred unease in him he had not foreseen. As the opening ceremonies began, the blend of tradition and modernity became ever more pronounced. Drums rolled beneath crystal chandeliers, and guests performed rituals of respect to ancestors before moving on to speeches of status, power, and influence. The ex-wife's presence, though understated, drew subtle glances. She carried herself with dignity, yet without arrogance, a paradox in a room steeped in hierarchy and judgment. The male protagonist moved among the guests, glass in hand, masking a growing tension beneath his carefully cultivated composure. She must stumble, he thought, the plan replaying his mind like a drumbeat. She must show the world that she is unaware, unworthy of what she now holds. Yet the closer she came to the ceremonial center, the more impossible it seemed to anticipate how events would unfold. Her calm intelligence, her innate moral compass, began bending the expectations of the night, like wind reshaping sand. Guests murmured about the elegant fusion of modern and traditional, while the staff adjusted placement of flowers and ceremonial items with nervous precision. All eyes, knowingly or unknowingly, were drawn to her subtle influence, her ability to command respect without display, a quiet power beneath visible simplicity. Even the elders, who had seen decades of social maneuvering, nodded to themselves, recognizing the innate strength she carried. The tension grew, silent but electric, as the male protagonist realized that this night might not go as intended. Pride and past grievances demanded humiliation, yet morality, humility, and wisdom intertwined in her presence, challenging the very foundation of his plan. The drums, the music, the ceremonial lights, all converged to create a stage for both confrontation and revelation. And in this intricate dance of tradition, wealth, and hidden knowledge, the first threads of the central conflict began to unravel before anyone spoke a single word. "Let the night begin," he whispered, though the words carried more uncertainty than authority. Unbeknownst to him, she held the true power now, invisible but present, rooted in intelligence, kindness, and an understanding of both tradition and human nature. And as the ceremonial candles flickered and shadows danced across the walls, it became clear. Tonight, pride would meet wisdom, vengeance would confront morality, and the outcome would be a story whispered in the city for years to come.